Sure, there are two kinds of tones, and let's use acting in a play as an example. When a character shows up in a play, they've got their own goals, worries, feelings, actions, and words. So, for an actor to play this character, the first thing is to really get into the character, to feel what they're feeling and understand what they want. For instance, if you're playing Hamlet, you've read the script, you know he's the main guy in the play, and you know all the stuff he's been through, like his dad getting murdered and him trying to figure out who did it. Later, he finds out the truth about the plot to take the throne and marry his mom. So, when you're playing Hamlet, you've got to become Hamlet. You've been through all this, how do you want to deal with it? You've read the script, so you've really gotten into Hamlet's emotions and what he wants. When he's sad, be sad. When he's unsure, be unsure. You've got to really live it. This idea is all about really getting into the character. There's a theory in drama that really pushes this. It wants actors to forget about themselves and totally become the character. It's the first thing every actor has to do. But it's just the first step, not the only one. Even if you totally become Hamlet, it doesn't mean you'll nail the performance. What makes a good actor? Being able to cry and laugh like it's real. If a director tells you to be sad and cry, and you do it, then people might say you've got what it takes. You get into character fast, that's what it's about. But that doesn't mean you're a great actor. Some actors really get lost in their roles. If it's a tragic character, they see themselves as that character. So, they cry, really feeling the sadness, tears running down their face. Is that a win? Well, it's better than not being able to cry. Those who can't cry have to find other ways to make themselves cry. How can I make these tears flow down? Or how can I hold them in my eyes and not let them fall? We must understand that performance is not about reenactment, but about showing. If you simply reenact the character, you have not succeeded. You must display the character. The distinction between reenacting the character and displaying the character is an important one. A truly qualified actor, when he sheds tears, will make the audience realize and understand why he is crying. The crux of the entire issue lies here. A top-notch actor, when he is crying, will make the audience really feel why he's shedding tears. That's the main thing. A good actor, while expressing the character's emotions, also lets the audience understand the nature of those emotions. Is this anxiety from a shady character? Or is it the anxiety of someone with a kind heart? Even though it's the same anxiety, when the character appears, they can't just say, I'm this kind of person, am I a hero or a villain? It all comes down to the actor's performance. So, when you're getting into the character's mindset, what else do you need? The emotional vibe. In other words, you've got to have a certain attitude towards the character you're playing. Acting isn't just about copying, it's about putting it all out there. An actor has to show the character's true nature, their actions, their emotions, and what it all means. Then, the audience can see if the character's actions are noble or lowly, grand or insignificant, and if the emotions are grimy or noble. It's all up to the actor. He's just diving into the character's emotions, getting into the objective tone, and then he's got to layer on another tone. That's what we call emotional evaluation. It's like stacking up the vibes. This is the trickiest part of all performing arts. We've rated the actors based on their artistic skills. Take for example, in the history of Chinese cinema, there was this male actor called Zhao Dan, died 1980, right? Have you heard of him? He's very famous. This actor Zhao Dan, his success, there are so many actors. Why was he chosen among so many to play a certain role? The richness and depth of a film character's inner world places extremely high demands on the actor portraying him. He must display that this person is Lin Zexu, 19th century CE, for example, as Zhao Dan did. Lin Zhe-shu in the film was played by him very successfully. The key issue here is the successful layering of tones. It's not just theatrical performance, but also the performance of music and song, all of which belong to the performing arts, as well as the recitation of poetry. They are all forms of performance art. In the realm of performing arts, every performer must always grasp one thing: the successful layering of two types of vibes. The music notes are right there, and you're a skilled performer, so you will definitely read the sheet music and dive into these pieces, these tunes, and the layers of sound they create. You can bring them to life, for example, on the piano or the violin, but that's not the only thing that matters. When you're playing a sad song, like the one that really got to me, Sarasate's Zigeunerweisen, have you heard it? It's pretty intense. The gypsies' lives and fates are full of tragedy, but the music also reflects their love for life, their passion, and their zest. Many violinists have taken on Sarasate's piece. I've listened to a few versions, and they all evoke different feelings. Take Muti, the female violinist, for example. Oh, her rendition is considered a classic too. And there are other performers who have tackled Zigeunerweisen, so what sets them apart? Well, Heifetz, the famous violinist, also played this piece, and I compared the two, and let me tell you the outcome. Muti really captured the objective tone, portraying it as a tragic segment of sorrow. But what did I feel? It was like she was just stuck in the sorrow itself. My initial reaction was like, she sounded like a woman full of bitterness, as if the gypsies are just so sorrowful, right? Suffering with no way out, that's what it felt like. Heifetz's version, on the other hand, was different. Oh! In that sorrow, there was a kind of strength, a confidence in life, making the sorrow not just unbearable. So, in addition to the objective tone of the sorrow itself, what did it offer? Emotional assessment. So, Heifetz's version is definitely much better than Muti's. It's like an actor crying, how they cry. It's not just about tears and snot, it's about letting us understand why they're crying, the source of that emotion and their nature. You have to cry in a way that brings out the depth of sorrow, and reveals the true nature of that sorrow. Reciting a poem is just like that. Sometimes we might not have made it clear between these two tones. One is when you're just getting into the objective tone of the poem itself. Like, when the character is angry, you recite it really loud, and when they're sad, you do it all soft and weak. But even if you recite an epic heroically, it's not enough. You're just sticking to the objective tone, but the performer also needs to give it an emotional vibe. So there are two situations, right? One is when you're totally in the objective tone itself. And then there's the other situation. When you're ignoring the objective tone and just going with your own emotional vibe. Both of these ways are a flop. What we need to do is find a balance, so it's like layering. It's always been this way to judge art, like music performance and singing, kind of like walking a tightrope. If you lean too much to the left, you're all about the objective tone. If you lean too much to the right, you're all about the emotional vibe. You've got to walk that tightrope and find a balance between the two. It's tough. In everyday talk, it's like holding back, right? You've got to hold back just right. If you get too caught up in the emotional vibe, it becomes all about you and doesn't really connect with what you're performing. You know, sometimes I feel like Lang Lang's performances have this issue. The one that really sticks out in my mind is when he got to play Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto at the Shanghai Oriental Art Center, which I absolutely love. I mean, Lang Lang is a big deal, right? A real source of pride for us Chinese, right? So, I was super excited to go and listen. But man, I was so let down after hearing it. It felt like he was too wrapped up in his own emotional vibe and didn't really get the true feel of Rachmaninoff's music. He kind of overlaid his own emotions on top of it. He shouldn't have done that. Maybe he changed later, but I started making an effort not to watch him and just closed my eyes. At the start, all his expressions and body language were like he was trying to explain the music to us, you know. But hey, music is meant to be heard, not to watch someone's physical performance, right? A musician can nail a piece without all the dramatic movements, right? Some people say Lang Lang has a ton of stage experience. But then I realized, music is for listening, not for watching. So, I hope he gets better at this. When we recite a poem, it's like that too. When you go back, give it a try and see how to recite that poem well, right? It should really touch us and also help us understand what it's all about. So, it's like mixing two different tones and finding the right balance. One person who really stood out to me is the late famous Chinese voice actor Qiu Yue-feng, died 1980. If you can find some of his voice acting work, that would be awesome. Qiu Yue-feng was really something. He always did the voices for the bad guys in Western movies. The way he mixed those two tones was just spot on. He made us hear the characters' inner hopes, fears, and plans, while also letting us hear the nature of those hopes, fears, and plans. That's how you do it right. So, like, when we're talking about this, we gotta give an example, you know? When we're talking about the characteristics of an artistic work, language often doesn't quite cut it because it's pretty subtle. So, I found the easiest way to show this by using a poem by Xu Ting as an example, to see what happens when two tones are mixed together. Let's take a simple work as an example. This one is a two-line poem written by the contemporary Chinese female poet Xu Ting in 1976. The title of the poem is, "I Love You," in quotes. The whole poem is just 4 lines. Let's see if in each line of her poem, there's a mix of two tones. Who, with tears in their eyes, wrote these 3 words on the beach, "I love you," right? In the second line, who, with gentle hope, used shells to create a colorful inscription. In the third line, it must be a girl, placing a bunch of daisies, tied with a red handkerchief, so that everyone passing by here is struck with nameless lovesickness. Let's look at the first 3 lines. What's the objective tone in each line? What's the tone of the emotional content? How do they come together? The objective tone is about telling the story, because she wants to narrate this event. In the first line, what's the objective tone? Someone wrote these 3 words on the beach, "I love you." But the emotional tone needs to be added. Without it, it's just a plain narrative, not an artistic one. A very important adverb, with tears in their eyes, adds an emotional tone. In the second line, later, these 3 words on the beach, these 3 words were used to create a colorful inscription with shells, so where's the emotional tone? With gentle hope. In the third line, it's another event. We see that now there is a bunch of daisies on these 3 words and they are tied with a red handkerchief. Where's the emotional tone? We clearly see the objective tone, right? It's about this event. Not only were the words used to create an inscription with shells, a colorful inscription, but also there is a bunch of daisies next to it. It must be a girl. She is not just stating the fact, she insists that it must be a girl, and she has tied the daisies with a red handkerchief. So, we see the 2 tones, combined here. The poem starts to be written like this: the event is narrated, the significance of this event, and the emotional significance are also displayed. This music piece, take, for example, that simple song we all used to sing as kids, like the Chinese Young Pioneers anthem, you know? It's all about capturing that youthful spirit, loving the country and the people, and embracing our communist ideals, right? So, naturally, the whole vibe of the piece is supposed to be uplifting and inspiring. But here's the thing, you can't overlook the way it's sung, the emotional vibe it gives off. At the start, when we're talking about being communists, that part should come across with some passion, you know? But then, when we get to the bit about loving the country and the people, that should be more gentle, full of deep affection for our nation and its people. The emotional vibe needs to ramp up, you feel me? Sure, singing it with too much passion might not be wrong in terms of the notes, but if the vibe is off, it just doesn't hit the mark. When I was a kid and I heard this song, I was always waiting for that tender, affectionate part. If that part is sung with too much fire, it just makes me feel kinda sad, you know? Because when you're expressing love for the country and the people, it's supposed to be heartfelt, right? It's the same deal with instrumental music, you know? It's not rocket science, the principle is the same. Why do some performances fall flat? It's all about nailing the emotional vibe in that section. One example that really sticks with me is Chopin's C-sharp minor, Fantasy Impromptu, you know? It's got 3 sections, fast, slow, fast, and that slow part is super important. Chopin wrote this piece to reminisce about his hometown and childhood, when he was exiled to an island off the coast of Spain. It was George Sand who locked him up there, to protect his genius and keep him from touring and performing all over the place, you know? So, he was feeling pretty lonely, thinking about his childhood and hometown. In that slow section, I've listened to a bunch of different versions. I probably have about 5 at home, and only one really hits the spot for me. It's not just a matter of personal preference, because that section needs to be played just right. It can't rush through, even though it's soft. It needs to really dig deep and make us feel something, you know? Touch the softest part of our hearts. After listening to all these versions, I found that only one really nailed it, the others were technically accurate, but they missed the emotional mark. It's like doing your homework but forgetting to add that emotional layer, you know? It's a big problem. So, these days, I'm kinda hesitant to listen to it, you know? Because it's so familiar, and actually, later on, some performers told me the same thing. I used to work at a music school, and there a teacher who had studied abroad and come back, I asked him to play the Fantasy Impromptu in C-sharp minor for us. There were over 10 of us who wanted to listen, and he said, "I'm most afraid to perform it. Because you're all so familiar with it, and your expectations are sky high, so I can't meet them." So, he played something else instead, some Liszt piece that we couldn't really get our heads around. Because it's pretty deep, and the technical demands are high. We all clapped and cheered, but deep down, it didn't really move me, you know? After I kept asking, he finally played the Fantasy Impromptu in C-sharp minor, and when it got to that slow section, I was hoping that it would touch the softest part of my soul, you know? But it just didn't. Of course, I was polite and all, but truth be told, I knew from then on, I probably shouldn't go and listen. Because I'd just end up disappointed. I'd rather go back home and play that record, you know? That's how it is. So, when we talk about the emotional vibe of a piece, we're talking about something really important. It's all about finding that balance between creation and performance, blending those two vibes just right, without going overboard. If the emotional vibe takes over completely, then the objective vibe starts to fade, and it becomes more about your personal emotions, which just isn't right.